Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the ANIMYZE Podcast Quarantine Edition. My name is David.
My name is Dunnery.
My name is Bethany.
My name is Youssef.
And we're all kind of trapped in our own homes, and we thought that we would make kind of a special little quarantine podcast for you guys to introduce a special guest, kind of the first guest on what we hope to be a line of other guests getting to talk about people who work in the anime industry and kind of what they do. So our very first guest for you guys is our good friend, Mason Lieberman.
Howdy there.
Mason is the senior game audio coordinator for Tencent, as well as working as a composer on shows such as Rooster Teeth's Ruby, Beyblade Burst Evolution, and he's collaborated with Funimation multiple times on shows like How Heavy Are the Dumbbells You Lift, which is really funny to me for some reason. I don't know why it's funny. What was the other one that you said? I forget it already.
I've also been a recording artist for things like Made in Abyss. I've worked on music production with shows like Zombieland Saga, How Heavy Are the Dumbbells You Lift, Ad Astra, Lost in Space, whatever that one was named. It was a long name.
The Brad Pitt movie Ad Astra?
No, the anime Astra Lost in Space. They came out at the same time, okay? For all I know, Brad Pitt was in an anime. I didn't see it.
Now, Mason, according to my research, this information may be wrong, but my research suggests that you worked on an anime I've never heard of before called Hell's Kitchen.
Actually, so have you ever seen Food Wars?
I was going to say, is
Shokugeki
it
no
like,
Soma?
Yeah.
I think one of their biggest influences was this mangaka by the name of Gordon Ramsay-kun. And actually, you know, he has this very heartwarming story. Obviously, there's a lot of you only really get it if you speak the original language, but he just has a very colorful vocabulary and this very flamboyant style. And it's all about him running restaurants and going to different places around the world and having shokugekis where he challenges the restaurant owners to be better at what they do. And it's called Hell's Kitchen because every day is his personal hell.
Would you say that Gordon Ramsay is more yandere or tsundere, in your opinion?
Shut it down.
100% tsundere, because if you've ever seen any of the shows where he works with children, you realize that actually there is a soft, tender underbelly to the scary beast that is Gordon Ramsay.
character development?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say tsundere. You can reason with him. You can fall in love with him. He will not slit your throat.
You just better have the lamb sauce. That's all.
As long
Lamb
as you
sauce.
have that lamb sauce.
And you're not an idiot sandwich.
I still think one of my favorite images is that image of that one chick from Food Wars, and they made it into "What Are You, an Idiot Sandwich?" And it's that you're asking me to remember Food Wars things here. That's the one.
You best not be talking about Arena.
No.
Nobody would call her an idiot.
Was it Megumin?
It was Megumin or Meg.
It was Megumi.
Yeah.
Megumi. Megumi is Konosuba.
Konosuba, yeah.
Always mess the names up.
Yeah.
I
Well,
thought you guys were talking about Megamind. So
That's also a great anime for very different
Big
reasons.
idiot sandwich.
so what we want to kind of do, Mason, is we want to get sort of a little rundown on kind of how you got your start working in the anime industry, and we're basically want to follow that thread until we can kind of talk a bit about this new project that you worked on, which was the Real Folk Blues, that collaboration with Yoko Kanno, Steve Bloom, Bo Billingsley, and that came out. What was it? Friday? A week ago? A little under a week ago that came out.
Friday, yeah, it came out just 4 days ago or so. Pretty crazy, right?
We've done pretty good with it in 4 days, don't you think?
Yeah, we're, I think, somewhere around 225,000 views on YouTube, around 400,000 or 500,000 in China. I'm pretty sure at this point our total charitable range is going to be in the 5-figure range.
And we still haven't even come out in Japan yet, technically.
More or less, yeah. No, we basically haven't. We've been getting purchases from Japan. There are definitely, I've seen a good number of orders that are shipping out to like Tokyo, Saitama, Yokohama, Kyoto, you name it. But yeah, I mean, we haven't even sent out the Japanese press release yet.
Interesting. And none of that is, and this is all going to be available too on iTunes and Spotify starting this Friday, the 8th, right?
Correct. Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, Google Play, and wherever good music is sold.
Sick.
So we'll make our way there.
Yeah, we're going to kind
of
segue ourselves into that. But for now, just as a general sort of question, what was sort of the thread that led you to getting your start into like the anime industry?
Yeah, sure. So, I've never actually told this story before, but I'm not actually from this world. I'm from another world, what you might call an isekai, a fantasy world, not at all dissimilar to something like Sword Art Online, but real. And in that world, I'm sorry to say, I was actually hit by a truck.
Reincarnated in another world as a composer.
Into this world, and when the goddess spoke to me and said, "What would you like for your ability?" I picked extraordinary good luck. And you're going to kind of see that that's a basic summary of why all of this seems to work. Basically, I've just been born into this world with the world's best luck stat, and it's just been awesome. In all seriousness, I've been playing cello since the age of 5. I've been a composer since I decided I wanted to be a composer in senior year of high school. And I worked really hard to get to the place where I am now and to be doing the things I do now with the great people I get to do them with, which include quite a few of you, as a matter of fact.
Hey, so is there a certain kind of moment, because Mason and I and Yusuf and Dunnery, the 4 of us were all at Berklee College of Music at the same time.
Yeah. So to kind of talk about the transition from Berklee to professional life and that first gig, I was at Berklee the same time as you are, and I actually kind of owe you personally for getting me into what would get me my first gig, because I recall we were hanging out in the dorms sometime, and you were like, "Yo, Mason, have you heard this song?" And you showed me the main theme from Ruby Season 1, This Will Be the Day.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that's sick. It's just great, J-rock type stuff. He's like, yeah, guess what? And I was like, what? The drums are all fake. And I was mind blown, because I didn't actually know jack about MIDI production or good drum sequencing. And I was like, these sound way too good to be fake. That cannot possibly be true. And you're like, it is, dude, it is. And so you then mentioned that the composer of this track, Jeff Williams, is actually a teacher at Berklee. And I was like, oh my God, I need to learn how he did that. That's wild. So I ended up shooting an email off to Jeff just saying, hey, do you have office hours? And if so, can I just show up at them and ask questions even if I'm not in your class? And Jeff being Jeff, if you've never met Jeff Williams before, he's a wonderful composer and just the absolute chillest human being on the face of the earth. And he basically just went, yeah, sure, whatever. It doesn't matter. Come on down. And I asked him how he produced the MIDI drums. He's like, yeah, no, they're all fake. And I was like, holy shit. It just blew my mind. And that kind of led to the slow growth of a friendship over the course of, at this point now, 7 years, that would ultimately culminate in me joining his team and starting as his assistant and then working my way up to being an additional composer on the Ruby soundtrack in season 3.
You were commuting from Boston out to his place,
It was an hour, 20-minute drive each way.
But that also led to you doing organizing concerts for some of the music of Ruby down at RTX, didn't you?
Well, I didn't end up organizing it. I don't want to take credit for that, but I did play on them. So we would have these concerts. That's actually kind of how the very first, proto gig was. The very first time Jeff ever asked me to do anything for him was the summer of 2014. He knew that I lived in Texas, and RTX, if you don't know, is the official Rooster Teeth convention. It's down in Austin, Texas. And he was going down there. He was going to do his first Music of Ruby panel. And he felt like maybe he could do a live performance or something, just something fun for the fans. And he was like, hey, Mason, I know that you're a cello player because we'd had a previous interaction where I'd basically told him his MIDI string mock-up on the song Wings sucked. And he went, well, you can't do better. And I was like, yes, I can. And I ran upstairs, grabbed my cello, and then played it better. At which point he was like, I'll remember that. Fast forward to summer, he did indeed remember that. And he invited me to come down and, just jam on a panel with him. So I knew that my good friend David, also on this thing.
I forgot about that gig.
You were also there, yeah. So he was coming down to just attend RTX, and I was like, hey, David, do you want to join us on this? And so all of us crammed together, me, David, Jeff Williams, and his daughter, the vocalist of the show, Casey Williams, into a hotel room, and we just sort of improvised some acoustic versions of theme songs on guitar, cello, MIDI keyboard, and voice.
That bossa nova version of This Will Be the Day.
Oh, yeah, it was so good. It really needs to come out. But as a result of that, when season 2 rolled around, actually, Jeff decided that he wanted to do those acoustic versions of the songs that we kind of had come up with for that panel on the soundtrack. So that was my very first time working with Ruby at all, and arguably my first anime credit of any kind.
Where did the transition sort of come into play for going from like this Western production with Ruby to actually working on a Japanese product or a Japanese like show?
Sure thing. So I worked on Ruby until something like spring of 2016. So a little bit of time there. And when I finished that show, it was the end of season 3, and I decided it was probably time to move on and see what else was out there. And I pretty much immediately hit like an 7 to 9 month span of barely any work. Like I booked a single game project in that entire time. It was not a high budget game at that moment. Work was not going well by any metric or standard. When I got towards winter, around December, I was actually called to do this concert over at MIT that Jacob Collier was doing, which was a really cool concert in and of itself and totally worth talking on any other podcast except for this one. And at intermission, during the show, literally in the middle of it, when I pulled out my phone to check it in between sets, I had a message from my oldest collaborator, a guy named Lance Trevino, a dear friend of mine from before I even went to Berkeley, who he had moved out to Los Angeles years before and was working as like a film composer and composer's assistant and that type of thing. And he had gotten asked to do some work writing on the show Beyblade, on Beyblade Burst God, as it was known in Japan, Beyblade Burst Evolutions as it's known out here. And he was like, hey, you worked on Ruby, right? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, you can play guitar because you play guitar on most of my stuff. So you know anime guitar, right? And I was like, uh-huh, I'll do it. What's up? And he asked me to just sort of become like the one-man recording crew for that show. Because that show was pretty low budget. They didn't have a full, budget for like a live orchestra each week or anything like that. It was really more of a, hey, we can get this guy in here and he'll play all the guitars and he'll do all the bass and he'll record drums and he'll do all this stuff and that'll be fine. Fast forward a little bit of time and it became clear that the show could benefit from having another composer involved, that I happened to know how to write anime-style music because of my experiences on Ruby, and that I was used to delivering under very tight deadlines. Because on Ruby, we would be writing an entire episode every single week. So, considering there are full songs in that, and, it's usually wall-to-wall music pretty much, it's pretty epic. That was definitely something that really helped prepare me for this experience. So I ended up joining the team as a composer with Lance, and we proceeded to score that show. That's also, incidentally, where my good friend David came along. 'Cause once I was writing, I didn't actually have time to record everything that I was originally going to be recording. So we brought in people like David and our mutual friend from our terrible college band, Aaron Lessard, and so on and so forth, John Benoit, to all come and play the various parts that I no longer had the time to take care of, because we were just cranking music out as fast as humanly possible. Multiple cues a day, nonstop for like a month straight. That show was very heavily behind schedule when I finally got the approval to start writing.
Mason, I'm curious, what was the communication like between you and the composer of the show?
The lead composer on that show was a fellow by the name of Zane. And as I understand it, I think that perhaps Lance and I had the most passion regarding the particular franchise, so we were pretty heavily involved. And I think that he may have been a little bit tired after having a couple rounds of working on the show before we were involved that didn't go quite so hot. So I actually had fairly minimal communication with him personally. And frankly, even Lance, for that matter, didn't have a ton of communication with him. But
the music
we did all work together.
The music you were composing, was this for the series at large, or was it separated between a Japanese score and a Western score?
This was for the series at large.
Can you tell me a little bit about your flight back to Texas while working on that show?
Yeah, so you know this story. So
I do know this story, yeah.
I mentioned that I got approved to write as a composer on the show. I didn't mention when. I'd been recording on the show, doing the guitar, bass, drum type thing for a few weeks, and pretty quickly we'd figured out it was probably a good idea for me to write, but we didn't know if it was going to be approved by Japan. You know what I mean? Because like you can't just add a composer because you're not doing your cues. You have to be upfront, communicate these things, so on and so forth. So we'd reached out. Zane, as I recall, I think maybe Zane's agent has reached out to the production company to say, hey, you know, we'd like to bring on someone on the team. Would that be okay? And there was a lag period before we even heard back on it. And it was like 2 weeks or something. And I'd like to point out that the concert for Jacob Collier was something like maybe December 8th or 9th, something like that. So if you're thinking about what 2 weeks later is, yes, it's basically Christmas. And I think it was either December 21st or 23rd. I was going to be flying home at 5 a.m. in the morning from Boston to Texas, where I do not have a computer, by the way. I don't have a work setup in Texas, to see my family, because that's what you do in the holidays. And right around 10 p.m. the night before that flight, I get a message saying, hey, Japan approved, you can write, here's your first cue, it's due in 12 hours. And of course, you know, it was a very intense cue. And I also didn't really have 12 hours because, again, my flight was at 5 a.m., which meant I needed to be at the airport by 3 a.m., which meant that really I had about 5 hours total to do this cue. And this is what they sent me. I'm going to give it to you word for word. You know, I'm going to try and paint as vivid a picture as I can. They sent a keyframe, a picture that was meant to describe the scene, because they did not send footage on that show, by and large, at least not to us. And it would show the main character. He's facing the camera, spiky hair, blue hair anime protagonist character named Vault Owly. He's holding a Beyblade and he's looking real angry, like, rah, kind of thing. And underneath, the most clearly Google translated sentence I've seen in my life. And I will never forget this. It is framed and hanging on my wall to this day. Two bladers blading. One blade's harder. Then
Iconic.
There is 80 seconds. So, of course, you know, that's just a ton of information to go on when you have 5 hours to write a 80-second long piece of music for your very first literal piece with this show you've never worked on before. So like all composers, I put on my detective's cap and I went, all right, let's deconstruct this. Let's figure out what this is as fast as possible so that I don't get fired before I even get hired. And I was like, all right, two bladers blading. There we go. That's a battle cue. Immediately, I understand that much. That sets my general vibe. One blade's harder. Welp. Well, someone starts winning, obviously, but I don't know who it is. I don't know if it's the good guy or the bad guy. So let's just make it more intense. We'll just have a pivot point where it gets even more powerful, more impactful. And then, of course, the piece de resistance. Then there is. Well, I don't know. Something happened. Let's change it up in the final part. So that gave me my 3-act structure for this track. It gave me kind of 3 core vibes to build around. Action, more intense action, something happens. Truly,
Beyblade gets destroyed, explodes.
Yeah, truly the 3 ingredients of good music is action, more action, and then something happens.
And then children crying.
Are you guys referencing my Beyblade story? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't think so.
I don't want to bring that up. I don't want other people to hear.
You do realize that you just brought it up, though, right?
I don't know what you're referring to, but I am curious.
He is the guest. You have to tell it now.
You do have to tell me now, but let me just finish this real fast.
Yeah.
Long story short, I pounded out the cue as fast as I could. It was this huge, epic, orchestra, synth, choir, rock band thing that was just a wild amount of work, like fever dream tears of like grind in those 5 hours. I made it to my flight successfully. I sent the cue off to Lance, and I was like, hey, I need you to like pump up the strings because I didn't have enough time to make the string mock-up sound as good as it should, even though I'd written the parts. So he went on there, he pumped that up. We submitted the cue, and it was approved by the time I landed.
Huh.
And that was like my first cue on that show. And as I recall, I think it was one of the first cues that actually got approved, period, because they'd been having a kind of difficult time for a little while because of just some confusion over what exactly Japan was looking for from this team.
But you know what? You bring up a good point as a composer. A lot of people don't realize this when it comes to scoring for media, that like turnover times can sometimes be in a few hours.
Crunch culture.
Absolutely.
I mean, did you study with Duncan Watt?
I did, and I love Duncan, and I actually saw him a few months ago when I was in Boston for the US-China Music Summit. I made sure to like swing by one of his classes and just say, hey.
Oh my God. Yeah, no, he's an incredible person. But like he would tell us stories that like Hasbro would call him the night before a commercial was airing. And they'd say like, we need something in a few hours.
Yeah, that's completely true. That's honestly probably pretty common, more common than it certainly should be. I think something that's really worth understanding for the non-musicians out there is that music is generally only composed at the very end of the production cycle. In Western film, we don't do it until the footage is locked. And it's not the same in anime. We have a different method for how we score things, but music still kind of, it doesn't always receive the benefit of maximum time. And because of that, that means that sometimes you're going to find that we have really, really limited amounts of time to make everything happen, while it feels like everyone else kind of got to lounge about and really take their time making sure they got whatever they wanted. So,
because there's a lot of nightmare stories that you hear about, like even the modern film industry, about composers being replaced with like 2 weeks until a film's release or 3 weeks until a film release, and it's like this new person steps in and they have to score or write or record and produce a whole film soundtrack in a matter of weeks.
Yeah, that's actually more common than you'd think, and it goes all the way. Like there are Star Wars films that have had that exact situation happen to them.
Yeah.
There are major Hollywood blockbusters of every shape and size, every color and creed, you name it. And I think traditionally one of the kind of lines that most major AAA and top-tier film composers would say is that, like, no matter how big you are, you're never big enough to not get replaced on a gig. Like, everyone has gotten fired from gigs. John Williams has gotten fired from films. And if John Williams can get fired, so can you.
Nothing is safe.
No one has job security.
A
Honestly,
reasonable
though.
assumption.
So I don't want to self-promote too much, but like does tournament arc, the formation of tournament arc, happen somewhere after this?
Yes,
I believe it does, right?
Absolutely, it does. So the formation of that group is actually kind of, it does technically relate to my anime career in that it was sort of, I think, the moment that me and Dawn Bennett, who's a dear, dear friend and the vocalist in our group, sort of really started to become close. And Dawn, of course, is the person who originally connected me with Funimation, which is what led to me working with them and is one of the things that ultimately led us, in a way, to the Real Folk Blues track. But Dawn and I had been friends for years. We'd never actually done anything together, but we both knew that the other person worked in anime too, and we liked the thing, and we respect each other as musicians. So we were like, oh, someday we'll do something together. And we'd been talking about this idea of maybe doing like an arrangement of like Beneath the Mask from Persona 5 just at some point. And we finally agreed to do it. We started production on it. And right as we were starting production, the Kingdom Hearts 3 trailer dropped unexpectedly and had the very first version, the 1.5-minute cut of Don't Think Twice. And she basically just messaged me, hey, Mason, we need to cover this right now. And I just sort of dropped everything. I was like, screw it. Let's have an all-nighter. Let's do this. And we put together a band that would ultimately comprise of David McLean, present, Yusuf Musavi, also present. We had a temporary keyboardist playing on our first track, the inimitable Harry Lotus. We had Dawn, of course, singing. I was on upright bass, and then I was producing / directing the track. And the wonderful Jess Destramp on the saxophone, or as I prefer to credit her when I can, Jeff Deathtrap. And we put together an arrangement of Don't Think Twice in literally probably 6 or 7 hours. And I like to think it sounded really good. And I shared it with Sebastian Wolf, who he's the CEO of the video game record label Materia Collective. And he's a good friend of mine, brilliant, brilliant guy, and absolutely just the biggest Kingdom Hearts fan in the world. And he literally said, are you going to release this formally? And I was like, we hadn't even talked about it. We hadn't thought about it at all. And he said, this needs to come out. Let me do it. And he somehow, I don't know what witchcraft he pulled, but that song was licensed and on the Spotify the next day. Literally in the morning, it was on Spotify.
He is the king of video game, music royalties.
I believe the word you're looking for is metadata? ?
He's the lord of metadata. And to this day, Disney has never come knocking saying, hey, how dare you do this cover? So I like to hope that means that he dotted his I's, crossed his T's, and that we did it right. And that's really cool because it is not easy for anyone who's ever released music to get it out overnight, especially when you're licensing covers and doing that kind of thing. So that was sort of the genesis of that group. And then we decided we'd use the same group of people on the next release, which was going to be the intended first release, the Beneath the Mask. We ended up getting Trevor Gomes, aka 88-bit music, to join us as the formal keyboard player for the rest of our releases moving forward. And, we became an internet band that did the thing. By last check, it's funny because we've never put money into marketing this band. We've never really been active on social media about it, but it still somehow racks up something like 26,000 monthly listeners on Spotify at this point.
Huh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think it just kind of speaks to how much people just sort of vibe with anime video game covers. If you put a lot of work into it, it goes well. The next year in 2019, we ended up winning a Gang Award for Best Jazz Remix, which was an honor.
Yeah.
Was really cool. That was also David's first time going to MagFest, so I like to think that it really helped make that experience.
That was pretty nice, won't lie. Pretty swell.
Solid bonus detail.
Yeah, it was not what I expected. I found out we were nominated for an award when we were like 2 hours out of Washington. We were at like a one of those like gas station rest stops where there's like a mini mall at the gas station. And I remember like looking at the world's biggest Rice Krispie. No, listen, it was like a 2x4 of Rice Krispies that you could buy, like Rice Krispie squares. And that's when Mason decided to tell me that we were nominated for an award.
But where was that box of Rice Krispies when Corona happened? I needed it.
Honestly.
Oh man, it's the
Where
only
is
thing
it?
keeping us sane out here in America, man. We're trying so hard.
Rice Krispie snacks.
Like, I get that our entire thing is supposed to be America first, but I didn't think that included coronavirus deaths, okay? But enough of that. Now that I've gotten my one roast out of the way, my one good joke, back to the anime music.
Over the kind of period of time since you worked on Beyblades until nowadays, you've kind of cultivated a pretty good work relationship with a lot of different people and a lot of different kind of aspects of the industry. One of them that I want to talk about, because you've worked on 2, 3, 4, I think 4 of his projects now, is you've done a lot of good work with Kevin Penkin, who is a friend of yours who was on The Real Folk Blues playing some excellent jazz flute.
Yes, he was. And he has not, as I understand it, I think that's the first time we've gotten someone, or that someone has gotten him to record flute in like 5 years. Like, he literally does not play it publicly for any reason.
I'm pretty sure he just publicly came clean about playing flute on his records, didn't he?
Pretty much. Like, it occurs to me, I don't even know if like his fans knew that he plays flute. He was a flute principal in college. Like, he's an amazing, amazing flute player.
So out of curiosity, where did that relationship sort of start?
We've worked together. I've been a recording artist on Shield Hero, and on the Made in Abyss movie. I worked in a capacity. I can't discuss it yet because I don't think we've announced the exact detail. Quote, I collaborated on Tower of God. There's actually another series that we worked on together as well, but that I can't announce my involvement in yet. And we've just worked together on a lot of random things. We worked on a charity project together, unrelated to this charity project. We've worked on indie game stuff together. We've done tons of stuff. The story of how me and Kevin kind of came together is, I kind of think, a really great representative example of how networking works in the game industry when it goes right. I was out in San Francisco for Game Developers Conference, GDC, which, if you work in video games, is basically like the mecca of working opportunities, networking. It's where you go to meet people, to find your next gig, to see the friends who you haven't seen since last year, and to otherwise celebrate working in video games. It is by far one of my favorite events of the year consistently, and probably one of the things I was saddest to see canceled when the world sort of shut down in March. But I was at the IASIG, the International Audio something, meeting event. There was a party hosted by IASIG, and I was hanging out and I was doing my signature move when it comes to networking, which is immediately launching into tirades about my favorite animes. Anime series. And I was chatting with a random Australian guy, and he was like, oh, so you worked in anime, right? And I was like, yeah, I did. He's like, oh, I know a guy who worked in anime. Hey, Kevin. And he like walked over, we went to the bar, and he introduced me to Kevin Penkin, who I did not know at that time, but who I was vaguely aware was an anime composer and who I knew had worked on the TV series Made in Abyss. And I had what I like to think is just a great, terrible introduction, wherein I knew that Made in Abyss had been recorded in Boston with this company's Soundtrack run by Shota Nakama, who I've worked with them a lot, and I thought that I'd recorded on that session. So I said, hey, I think that I might have recorded on your soundtrack. And calling my bluff immediately, he went, oh, really, mate? Like, and he pulled out the credits for the album. Like, hold on, let's see. Like, let's find your name right now. And of course, we couldn't find it. And like we later realized it wasn't that I was lying. It's that I probably legitimately would have been on that session, but it was like the 1 week that I was out of town and not in Boston that summer. So like it legitimately was one of those things like, yeah, it's fair that I would have assumed that I was there. I just wasn't actually there. But we chatted for a while and we got along really well. And we just sort of agreed to keep in touch. And about a month later was PAX East out in Boston. And Kevin actually was still in America. He came out to it. And we decided to hang out. And we literally were just chilling at PAX East for like, I don't know, 4 hours or something, just talking, you know. It turned out that we'd had a lot of similar musical upbringing things, weird experiences, cultural background stuff that had happened to us. Like we had a great sense of camaraderie and experience from having done a lot of the same stuff. And so kind of on a lark, I was there with the Kickstarter for this indie title that I was working on called Renane. And basically we were like, hey, do you want to like arrange a track for this game? And he was super game. And I worked out the contract with him like on the spot. And we basically announced that he was going to be a guest orchestrator, arranger on a track if we could hit a certain stretch goal, which of course we did successfully manage to hit because that was just a great PAX East. And that started a really long friendship that's gone to this day. We've hung out in Japan multiple times on different occasions. I've been to Australia. We hung out a ton there. We've hung out on both coasts in America. Like we've legitimately pretty much hung out and been friends all over the world at this point. And it's been really wonderful. And through him, I made a bunch of other great friends who I also care about deeply. His manager, Fabian Malabello, is another one of my favorite people. Through him was where I really became friends with James Landino, who prior to that point I'd known, but had never really been close to. We didn't chat all that much. And there was just this entire crew of people who we all sort of became close to. After PAX East, we all ended up in Japan at the same time for Tokyo Game Show. And the core unit of friends that we formed during that trip, like all of us have a group chat that's still running like 3 years later now, 2 years later, whatever. A great, great friend, very dear person to me, someone who I care about deeply.
So now,
and a cheeky bastard.
And Mason's number one waifu, if I remember that credit right.
Yes, he did formally request. That was actually his idea to credit himself as professional Mason Lieberman waifu on the Real Folk Blues.
I don't like that at all.
What would a semi-professional waifu be?
Hopefully
One
unpaid.
that you paid for.
Inquiring minds want to know.
I don't know. We didn't think about it that deeply. It's one of those things that just survived.
So
I'm pretty sure I have a Goofy credit on one or two of his tracks too, so it kind of works out.
So in the interest of kind of getting to the big topic, yeah, the one that people are kind of most interested in now that we've clickbaited them for 40 minutes.
Nailed it.
Yeah, perfect. So the Real Folk Blues, like I don't know whether or not I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but like I got to record on this one, which was really cool. I got to play guitar on it, and
you killed it on guitar, by the way.
It was fun. And I think there was like a group of, I think about, what was there, like 7 or 8 of us at the very beginning, just off of a Facebook post. Really?
Yeah. So literally what happened is, I think it was March 15th, I want to say. This project, by the way, just for people who don't know, literally from initial idea to released and out on the Funimation channel, out released on vinyl, happened in 45 days. So it was really, really fast. And it was March 15th or whatever it was. And I posted on Facebook because I happened to have some free time that week. Hey, does anyone want to do a collab? Because I've generally found whenever I have free time, I do collabs. They're a ton of fun. I get to work with musicians I've never worked with, and every single one is better than the one before it. So it's like, why not? You know what I mean? And I knew that there were a lot of musicians who were out of work or who were currently a lot more available than usual, because of the COVID lockdowns and quarantine kind of shutting down the entire touring industry. So I thought, hey, this could be an opportunity to collaborate with a lot of artists who usually wouldn't be available to do anything, but who I really love and who I'd love to do something with. And so I posted that and ended up with like 150 responses from people who wanted to be on it or something. And I started kind of combing through, and as I have been known to do in the past, I sort of put together my hit squad of crack, talented musicians who would be perfect for the idea that I had. And I had a couple of tracks that I kind of wanted to do, but the one that seemed to make the most sense and that I think people were vibing the most with that I initially proposed was to do this sort of gospel-infused, hip-hoppy special edition of the Real Folk Blues. Now, when we first started working on this, it was just a music track. It was something we were all doing because we loved the music, because we're fans of Yoko Kanno. We didn't have any grand ambitions or expectations of where it would end up. What fools we were. We started working on the track, and as it was coming together, I arranged it and I was doing the pre-mix. I was setting everything up before it would go to the actual mixer, which was Masahiro Aoki. And it was starting to get pretty clear that this was a really, really good group of musicians, just wildly good. And sort of the first breakthrough was that there was this like kind of gospel, like a clap section, pause moment before the hip hop section came in, just like a 16-bar area of free space. And there was no melody there. It was just sort of open and vibing and jamping. And I thought, what if we got like one of the voice actors come on and like do a cameo there? That would be pretty neat. And I already knew Bo Billingsley from a previous project. Bo is the voice actor of Jet Black from the Cowboy Bebop dub. And I just shot him a message. And I was like, hey, Bo, like, I got a track. If you're interested, I'd love to have you as a special guest. We don't really have anything really defined at this moment, but we kind of think we're just going to give this to charity. Let me know if you'd be interested and willing. And Bo got back to me really fast. And he's just the sweetest gentleman, the nicest guy. And basically, he was like, hey, I love what you guys are doing. I support charity. Whatever you guys want, I would be happy to help with. So from that point, we kind of committed. We were like, all right, we're just going to donate all proceeds of this track to the CDC Foundation and to Doctors Without Borders, because those are two causes that I care about personally and that I felt were definitely very appropriate given the nature of everything going on in the world. From that point, I actually am also friends with someone else who was involved in that franchise, a great vocalist by the name of Raj Ramaya, who had sang on the Cowboy Bebop movie, in Wolf's Rain, variety of stuff. I think he used to basically be like a singer with the Seatbelts.
He's actually a Canadian.
And he's actually Canadian, fun fact.
Hey.
It's incredible.
It's cool because like he's an early sort of musical collaborator in the anime industry.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great
90s,
reminder that like anyone can end up working in the industry anywhere. Like it really isn't just about where you're born. It's about where you choose to go. And Raj is, I've known Raj for a while now. He was actually someone who I met through Kevin, because Kevin had worked with him before. And then we were like, oh, we'll all grab drinks when we were out in San Francisco the following year. And we ended up becoming friends. And Raj is just this great guy, super zany character. And he was like, hey, I'd be down to sing on it. And I was like, oh, that'd be sick. You sang on the movie. People would love that. That'd be awesome. And actually, I asked him to do that. At the same time, I had this idea once I heard the final verse. Zed ends on this line. He says, bang, which if you're a Cowboy Bebop fan is a tremendously impactful line. And I just thought, man, wouldn't it be cool if we got Steve Bloom to come in and say that and say, see you, Space Cowboy? And I don't know Steve Bloom personally, and not at this time. But I had a friend or two who did, and I reached out, and there wasn't really any response. We didn't get through to him. But when I was chatting with Raj during this project, after he recorded, I was just telling him about the project and ideas I'd had. He was like, oh, I know Steve. He's a really good friend. Like, I could reach out to him for you and see if that works. And I thought, sure, I don't want to inconvenience you. I don't want to inconvenience Steve for that matter. But, if you're willing, I'll put together an email for you. And if you're comfortable, just forward it along to him and let him know that you're on the track. And if he wants to, you'd love to have him too. And Steve responded to that almost immediately. So clearly the way I was trying to get through to him, I just wasn't reaching him because he's very responsive and just the best. And he proceeded to record. He did the Sea Space Cowboy bang thing. And then completely unprompted, he sort of just recorded this thank you call to action message that was perfect for the end of the video. I didn't even ask him for that. I guess he's just, been around the block so many times that he just knows what a project needs. So that was just a wonderful, wonderful thing to receive. And suddenly this track is starting to look really legit with the voice actors for Jet and Spike Spiegel on the track and an original singer from Cowboy Bebop and, just like a ton of great musicians. Shihore, who is a Japanese J-pop singer-songwriter, was on the track as well. And she's worked with Yoko Kanno before on other stuff. And at this point, it was getting clear that this was probably going to draw some attention when we released it. So I really needed to make sure the license cleared properly. So I submitted to the Airy Fox agency, which is part of how that works in America. And I actually reached out to Funimation, who administer Cowboy Bebop in America, and said, hey, I'm doing this thing. It's for charity. I would love to partner with you guys if you would be interested. And also, I just want to make sure that I do all this legitimately. I don't want anyone to feel that I'm trying to at all profit or steal from the brand, anything like that. I would like to just donate all of this to charity and have it be nice and clean and simple. And, if you guys are willing to do it, then however you guys want to do it, I'm game. And having worked with Funimation for a few years, I sent that to a producer I work with very often. She forwarded it internally to marketing. Apparently marketing liked the idea, so they forwarded it internally to some of their brand managers and to some of the people involved in like the audience appreciation development, things like that. And suddenly, they're all saying, hey, we really like the idea, but of course, this is Sunrise's brand, Sunrise's IP. They're the original animation studio. We just want to make sure that they're on board and that they're comfortable with it because we would never want to, do something that would in any way jeopardize the Cowboy Bebop IP. They care very deeply about it. And of course, I was fine with that. That was totally cool with me. And I was like, wow, we're going to get to Japan on this one somehow. And Raj, continuing to be the bro that he is, pointed out, hey, most of my catalog is administered by Sunrise Music for obvious reasons. I have good relationship over there. Would you like an introduction? And Raj proceeded to introduce me to one of the producers at Sunrise Music. I pitched the project to him. He liked it, and he said that he would pitch it to Sunrise Animation. And when Funimation had said they were going to reach out, I think they were getting through, but perhaps it was getting a little bit delayed as far as the messaging, just because there's so much that they were dealing with. But when I got through via the Sunrise Music side, it was almost like immediate. Like within a day or two, we'd gotten back from them and they said, hey, we think it's interesting. We like the idea, but we're going to have to share this with other people to make sure that we can sign off on the cover process. We have to share this with all the rights holders, stakeholders. And in this case, that meant they were going to have to send the track to Yoko Kanno herself and Yuho Iwasato, who is the lyricist for the track. And, I was just on cloud nine at that point because I was like, wow, Yoko Kanno is going to hear a piece of music that I arranged. Like, there's no way it could get better than this. This is the height of this project. This is the coolest thing that will happen. Like, she'll hear it probably. It'll be in her email inbox, and she'll just say, yeah, sure, whatever. If she does. And so what happened next really stunned me. There was, like, maybe 3 or 4 days of radio silence. And then I woke up one morning and I had an email in my inbox, not from Sunrise, who hadn't gotten back to me yet, but from my personal website's contact form. It said, Yoko has sent you a message through the contact form.
Oh my God.
And it was this wonderful message from a great gentleman by the name of Nishi Kazuki, who is the president of her personal company. And he said, hello, I represent Yoko Kano-san. She has heard your track and she would like to say thank you for using her track. Yoko would like to know whether or not you would be interested in featuring her band, the Seatbelts. And then this is like the best part of the email to me. He's like, the Seatbelts are a band that we formed for Cowboy Bebop. And I'm like, no, I think I know that. I think
Don't
I know
say.
it. You don't say. So, of course, I told her no, that my vision had never included her, and that artistic integrity was number one, and I deleted the email immediately.
As one
But
does.
no, of course, I said, hey, wow, thank you so much for that message. It is very kind of you. We would be grateful for whatever Kano-san would be willing to contribute. It means a great deal to us, and obviously we care deeply about this music, so we're good. Whatever she would like to do, we're okay with it. And he responded the next day, hey, it will take her a few days to get things together. And it was very vague and very non-defined. So I spent the next few days having literally no idea what she was going to be sending us, because I initially thought, hey, with the way that this was worded, this could just be like her sending stems from the original recording, which would be cool in and of itself. Like that would also be awesome. And we would do like remix things with that, and that'd be fine. But then she sent me before we get to that. So I responded, hey, I don't know what y'all are doing, but whatever y'all do is great with us. I just wanted to say, and you can totally ignore it because I didn't want to be like rude or be demanding. I was like, I just want you to know we're going to be creating a music video for this. And if Kano-san would like to be in it, we would love that. Feel free to have her film herself doing whatever she does if she'd like to, or not. It's totally okay. We don't want to just
Standing
whatever
at the
works for
feet
you.
of giants.
We just want you to know that we're making a video and it would be really cool to feature whatever she's creating.
Trying not to freak out, basically.
Exactly. I'm trying not to scare them off.
I'm totally relaxed about this. What are you talking about?
Yeah, of course. It's totally normal. I always talk to Yoko Kanno and her manager. A few days go by and I receive an email saying, here it is. And it was a stereo track of the entire band playing. She had originally said maybe for 8 measures. This was for the full, the second half of Mega Ran's rap through the end of the track. So this was more like 30 measures or something. It was way more music than I was expecting. And it was brand new arranged material that she had specially made just for this track.
Oh my God.
So it was new material. It wasn't a stem from a pre-existing recording. They had literally taken our track and performed something brand new for it that did not exist, which is just mind-blowing to me. And it wasn't just that. They also sent us a fully completed video with all the edits, everything that you see from Yoko's section of the individual seatbelts coming on screen and being in the various little boxes and moving.
Oh, that was them
stuff.
Did that?
They did that.
Oh my God.
They sent us an alpha that was literally that. So we just slotted it in as was. We legitimately did not edit her video footage whatsoever.
Quarantine is really hitting hard.
Yeah. We're not the only people who are apparently bored out of our minds.
Yeah, we've got a lot of time to do stuff.
But legitimately, they sent us, full video, full audio. And all of a sudden, our track that at that point had been 30 musicians suddenly jumped up to 42 just overnight because Yoko Kanno and the entire seatbelts all jumped on board, which is just so incredible, so ridiculously cool.
Well, you probably hit, I mean, you were talking about luck at the beginning of all of this. You probably hit at the perfect time because unbeknownst to everybody, her and the Seatbelts were starting their YouTube page, The Session Starducks, where they were making covers of their own songs. They were probably all ready for this. You know what I mean? It's perfect timing.
I think maybe it was serendipitous timing. Maybe it was the fact that I think Yoko probably just, I think Kano-san believes in charity. I think she's the kind of person who supports it. So I think that the fact that this was using her art to do something good for a lot of people maybe resonated with her in some way. That's what I like to hope. Maybe she just heard the track and thought, Mason is truly the heir to my music, and let us coronate him on this day. It probably wasn't that.
I honestly think she just woke up one day and was like, you know what, 2020 needs me.
She was like, it is my time. I must protect anime.
Honestly,
and
we were like,
on that
please.
day, anime was saved.
True.
She single-handedly delayed or canceled all the isekai TV shows, and then she made new music. She literally saved anime.
Because I remember early on in the project, like, I don't know, we tracked everything. I tracked it before like the quarantine hit in Canada. I was done my sort of like guitar parts. I filmed my video aspect at Yusuf's place the last day before everything in the province shut down. And we were ready to deliver the product. Like, it was done. We had it like mixed. Everybody was in like 2 weeks. And then, somebody new kept coming in every time. And it kept being like, we're going to delay it a little bit because this person's going to be on it now. And we're going to delay it a little bit because we might get a guest spot from so-and-so. And then it just kept getting more and more delayed.
Yeah.
But
so what actually happened is, I would say, a feature-complete version of the song that wasn't mastered and that did not have the seatbelts was ready by about April 3rd. So in a little over 2 weeks, basically.
Yeah.
And then everything from April 3rd to May 1st was making the music video better, because there was a lot of stuff we did to make it even tighter and even better looking. And it was getting the seatbelts on the track, and it was getting Sunrise and Funimation on board. And then it was coordinating between Funimation and Sunrise to make sure that the impact was well distributed and that people would like the track. Like, the vinyl thing legitimately was an idea that I had a week before we launched. And I was just like, hey, would it be okay if we released this on vinyl? And I had already had a B-side remix ready to go from the Bishop game, who's just an awesome artist, does amazing stuff, great work. And I was just like, hey, here's this other remix that I've got as well. Would you guys have a problem if we just made a vinyl of this? And like, we'll make the art, we'll do the design, we'll do everything. We just want you guys to be okay with it. And legitimately, as I recall, the only thing that Sunrise even said about it was they're like, well, here's the copyright information. Make sure that you include this and this. And we're okay with it.
Wow. Incredible.
Because they were just like, they were taking care of it at this point. Like, they were very, I think that people have this perception of, you know, vaunted legendary Japanese companies that they're very stiff or traditionalist and that they don't like to try new things. But in some ways, I think that this is kind of a great example of one of those studios. You know, Sunrise does Gundam. They are one of the absolute scions of animation. And like, they're working with these like young upstarts in America who are producing this thing. And like, sure, Yoko Kanno was on the track, but she wasn't on the track when they had agreed to start working with us on it. Like, they were already interested in doing this and doing charity and all that stuff. And they were working through the process to be able to approve it before Yoko came on board. And I think, sure, you know, it's safe to say that probably sealed the deal at that point. But I'm pretty sure that even if Kano-san hadn't decided to reach out and offer to do this, that they would have gone ahead and helped us out anyway.
absolutely incredible. I mean, giants in the industry, absolutely legends, especially with the mecha genre.
For sure. I mean, Kano-san is, I would say, indisputably my favorite Japanese composer in all of anime.
You speak for all of us there.
Yeah.
I mean, she's certainly the biggest influence for me. She got me into jazz. She got me into anime. And I think that as someone who is mainly known for writing kind of jazz rock and rockier side of things, doing J-rock, that type of thing, my musical existence wouldn't exist without Yoko Kanno. Like, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I certainly wouldn't be doing the things I do now. And I owe her a world of gratitude. So the opportunity to get to collaborate with her on something like this, on, an IP that is so famous to, the myth of Yoko Kanno, the legend of her music, just absolutely mind-blowing. I will be thinking about this for the rest of my life.
She also posted, I don't know if you know this, she posted your song on her website.
Really?
She did.
Huh.
I'm going to need you to link that.
It's kind of hard to find. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Oh, nice.
Huh. Sick.
That is awesome. I feel like I'm on Mari, and you're just like, oh, and by the way, your song's on the website.
This
And
is
I'm
where
like,
the
oh
audience-
my God, I'm the father.
Actually, it's
The
funny.
audience starts freaking out.
No one really knows she has a website. She actually sells.
Arrangements. I'm not going to lie. I feel like this says so much about who I am as a fan. One of the first things that I did when I got the email from her president was I found that website and I immediately went and bought the sheet music to Tank, on the spot.
Oh yeah. That's an amazing.
I wasn't
score.
even thinking about it. I was just like, oh wow, it's here. I can have this now. Here's my money. I don't think I even told them that I did that because I was like, I don't want them to take me seriously. I don't want them to think that I'm just going to be nerding out on them the entire time.
Right.
So I guess with a couple sort of closing remarks to kind of wrap up on everything, what's next? Now that you've kind of worked off this real folk blues, is there anything sort of in the pipe that you can talk about, or is there anything kind of down the line that you can't talk about that you can talk about without talking about? Is there, what's the next step now that you have worked with Yoko Kanno? Where do you go from here?
In true JRPG fashion, it is time to ascend the steps and kill God. I would say that you've known me for a while. I've always kind of just really been into the idea of using my free time for charity projects. I've just always liked doing it. I actually have another charity project totally unrelated to this that's also in the anime world that'll be coming out sometime in the nondescript future, involving the Animator Dormitory Project, involving housing for low-income animators, and the creation of a new animation production system that would pay animators a fair wage. So I'm looking forward to that. That's actually all done from a musical side. And fun fact, David is on that, as I recall.
Oh, is that the thing I did acoustic for that long time ago?
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
So
Bethany technically helped on that.
Ooh,
Bethany,
Did I really?
Bethany came to assist the recording on that session.
that is super cool.
Yeah, Bethany.
Bethany didn't know that.
Well, now you know that you're the father. What I would say is that, and then obviously it's impossible to do something like this. We've moved almost 1,600 vinyl at this point. I don't know what the final total is going to look like when this is all said and done, but there's no world where we're donating less than $10,000. It's possible we'll be hitting 20, 25,000, maybe even higher. Who knows?
That's incredible.
Wow.
That would be amazing for something that came together in 45 days and there was zero budget for. Funimation didn't ask for a cent. Sunrise didn't ask for a cent. None of the artists ever asked for a cent. Obviously, I didn't ask for a cent. Everyone just did this of their own free will because we're all musicians and we all get it. We all support these things. It's one of those things that I think brings all musicians together. Is most of us have very, I think, communal spirits in a certain sense. I think a lot of us are used to playing with others, so we're used to empathizing with others, thinking emotionally, and we want to help make the world a better place with art. That's just what we do. So I would say 100%. I'm thinking about a follow-up to this project, another big franchise charity thing. What I will tease is that I have been in contact with another franchise. I've been contacted by several amazing artists who would love to be a part of, quote, the next one. And while I'm still looking to see whether or not it'll be viable or not, we have begun open conversations with this franchise from the studio level, and they're working on getting us a response as quickly as they can because they understand the nature of timeliness in the name of charity and trying to do the maximum amount of good in the fastest amount of time. So fingers crossed. If that one gets approved, I actually think that we'll be announcing it before it goes live. I think that people will know about it because part of the idea for it was maybe it'll have some audience participation.
Oh, neat. That's pretty cool.
That's incredibly exciting.
Participation, audience participation. I don't know what that was.
It's the thing that we didn't get to do this time. It's everyone's favorite part of music production. Sending 500 wildly differently recorded stems to the mix engineer and telling him to kill himself. Yeah, no, in all seriousness, we'll see. But obviously, we hope to do more. Everyone who's been involved in this project has told me that they would love to keep doing charitable stuff. All the artists are amazing people, and shout outs to every single one of them.
And it's not only just that too, but like anime fans are, by kind of like intrinsic nature, they are consumers of a media and of a medium of art that like is almost untold. Like anime fans consume and they buy and they support the things that they love. I think my favorite part about this whole endeavor has been reading the comments on some of these things that we found on Reddit before we got too big for Reddit and they had to take our posts down. And
that did actually happen.
That did happen, yep. And YouTube and the comments we see on Twitter and things like that. I mean, I fanned out a little bit when I found out that Steve Bloom and Bo Billingsley and obviously Yoko Kanno were going to be on the track, but like, you know, Steve Bloom was my childhood hero from Digimon. So like I and Final Fantasy, both Bo Billingsley played Barrett in the Final Fantasy Advent Children movie and Vincent Valentine is Steve Bloom. So like
amazing. Yeah, it's like just such incredible artists. And I think that there's someone on this track for everyone. I mean, personally, I nerd out a little bit whenever I see Substantial on anything because he's one of my favorite rappers in the world. And I've been lucky to collaborate with him a few times, but this is probably my favorite that we've had the joy of doing to date because it's just, you know, you can't really come up with a better memory than this in some ways.
Yeah. So to put the sort of proverbial nail in the coffin, so about that Beyblade story, Yusuf.
Oh, no. Wait, it's not that funny, though.
Thank you, everyone. This has been a wonderful time.
Yeah. So
it's not that funny. It's just that when I was a kid, I went to Chinatown in Toronto.
Oh God.
And they were selling a lot of anime merchandise there when I was young, like hilariously shitty Digimon figurines that when you opened up the box, they would just literally explode. Like they were all put together in the plastic, and then the moment you opened it, just pieces.
Oh.
No, but I remember I bought this Beyblade. So we all know the size of like an official Beyblade, right?
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's like a small little like Oreo cookie or something, probably in circumference. I saw
Great
this
description.
Yeah. I saw this massive green Beyblade that was obviously fake ripoff, but it was the size of like, I don't know, an official size baseball, maybe. like I'm talking massive. But the moral of the story is The bigger they are, the harder they fall. Because when I took it home,
You
I
bought it.
battled my friend. I battled my friend who had an official one. And we were Beyblading in a salad bowl. Because despite having a rather privileged upbringing, my parents refused to buy the expensive pieces of plastic like arenas, you know? So the plastic bowl, it was like flat at the bottom. So there was no way for the Beyblades to actually interact with each other. So after a very intense let it rip, they're just moving beside each other, spinning infinitely, but not actually moving at all. Because again, the base is flat. And then all of a sudden, his official, much smaller than mine, Beyblade, just slowly starts to edge over to my enormous Beyblade. I kid you not. It nicks it like a goddamn summer breeze. I'm talking like the smallest little nick. And
Thank you for that ASMR experience.
Instantly, my Beyblade blew up into 1,000 goddamn pieces.
So what you're telling us,
that's why you don't pirate things. Got it.
what you're telling us is that 2 bladers were blading and 1 bladed harder.
And then there was
1,000 pieces of one of the
See, I told you
Beyblades.
they explode.
Oh
and
my
then
god, that
Kyle-
actually was a great bookend because of what Bethany just said.
I was going to say, did we just come full circle?
We did again.
We really did. Great
I-
job, guys.
I think it warrants mentioning now that Mason's cover of the Real Folk Blues can be viewed on Funimation's YouTube page. It's also on Anime Lab's YouTube page. And again, can you talk a little bit about its upcoming digital streaming release?
Yeah, sure. So it's currently available on Bandcamp. You can pre-order the vinyl release, a vinyl single with a B-side from the Bishop Game remix, until May 30th on Crates. That's Q rates, Crates. And it'll be releasing on all major international digital storefronts on Friday, May 8th at midnight. So, stay up late on Thursday and reward yourself with some sweet, sweet anime jams.
I can't stress enough, if anyone listening to this is a vinyl lover, you probably owe it to yourself to get this thing. It looks amazing. And as far as I'm aware, it's the only Bebop release that's ever been made into vinyl.
So, kind of wrapping it up, thank you guys so much for listening. Having to do stuff in quarantine has been kind of special, but we found a way to make it work, and we look forward to getting to talk to you guys again. Hopefully, we'll get some other cool guests on here to talk about their careers and their experiences. So, Mason, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, David. I'm always happy to be here. I love the podcast. You guys kick butt.
We'll see you guys later. This has been ANIMYZE, and buy the Real Folk Blues on vinyl. Bye.